On April 26, we got the first look at the upcoming Uprising set for Flesh and Blood. With that article came information on world premiere events to be held across the world on the second weekend of June. And amidst all the excitement, set speculation, a side conversation was happening. What would the attendance to the events like the one in Las Vegas look like, given only 7 weeks of advance notice? Now, for many, it was irrelevant. Their tickets were booked and details to be figured out later. For others, existing plans were already in place, or the duration wasn't enough time to organize their lives enough to attend. Now, from a purely organizational standpoint, there are plenty of reasons that more advance notice might not have been able to be given, not the least of which is ensuring in today's supply chain challenged world that the product would actually be ready for the events. So today I'm asking you, the Dice Commando community, for a travel event, how much advance notice is appropriate? How much is not enough?
A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando.
Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. I'm Andy with you here as always, and thank you very much for checking in again today. So tonight's video I find to be an interesting discussion, probably mostly because I honestly don't know what the right answer is. I know how I feel about it, and I know what I've read out there on the interwebs, but I'm honestly curious to get everyone's feedback. Now, I do want to take a minute before we get started to acknowledge our sponsor, FabDB, which we all know and love as our best resource on the interwebs for all things Flesh and Blood. When you're over there doing your deck building or managing your collection, consider upgrading your account to unlock all those spiffy additional features. And I wanted to thank our friends over at FabDB for sponsoring us here and for everything that you do for the Flesh and Blood community. So now, before we get into this tonight, let's just get one thing out of the way. Nothing is going to work for everyone. On top of that, no reasonable person expects everything to work for everyone, right? Each person has different expectations, is in different phases of their life, has different financial situations, concerns, and so on, right? And realistically, we understand that unless you're single, have no living family, and you're somehow independently wealthy, you're probably going to have a travel event you have to miss at some point, right? We all get that. So no, there are no unreasonable expectations on this going in. But on April 26th, New Zealand time, which was effectively midday Monday the 25th in the US, we got the article drop about Uprising. And man, it was quite the article, right? A lot of exciting stuff in there. Dragons, flames, ninjas, all that. But at the bottom of the article, there was a surprise little tidbit of information about the world premiere events. 3 events across the world, showing it right here, that were several weeks ahead of the set release. I think 2.5 weeks ahead of the set release. Get there, and it's awesome because you can be among the first to crack packs of the new set. This seems pretty exciting. Within minutes, our own Discord was abuzz about who was going to make it down to Las Vegas. But around the same time, much of that conversation very quickly turned to, well, I can't go because I already have something planned, or it's just not enough time, or have you seen how expensive flights are, or whatever it may be, right? And that, I think, reasonably and naturally led to discussion. Did LSS really give us enough of a heads up on these particular events to allow for the community at large, to plan to attend? Being a few days shy of 7 weeks, I'll show the calendar right there to prove it, was 60 days reasonable heads up. Is that reasonable heads up? What's standard, right? I mean, is there a standard anymore? I don't know. So, before we get into the fighting and discussion or whatever it may end up as, I do want to start on the side of LSS, right? I like to look at things from both sides. So first, we have to assume that LSS naturally want to give us as much time as possible because, after all, we have to assume that they want their own events to be as successful as possible. And hype begets hype, and the longer it is, the more people talk about it, the more people want to go. That said, there are logistical reasons why they might have only been able to give us 7 weeks, right? We already talked about in the intro, one of the biggest ones is they had to ensure that they were going to be able to get product to those locations in the world to make it happen, right? I mean, that's pretty reasonable. Is the set actually going to be ready? You don't want 900 people sitting in a room ready to crack booster packs and you roll out a case of Tales of Aria and be like, well, this is what we got, right? I mean, that's just not going to work. So that makes sense. Now, in terms of the final details, the scheduling, making sure they have the conference center or the hotel set up or whatever, that's probably been done for a while, right? You would think, right, has probably been done for a while. So, you can go either way on that. And then, something that has crossed my mind is, unlikely but is possible, is were they intentionally waiting until it was closer to New Jersey so that travel was booked to New Jersey and finalized for it by most people? Because there are many people who, if forced to choose, especially like West Coast USA people, many may have chosen to attend the premiere in Vegas versus just going to a side event or the calling in New Jersey, right? Obviously, if you're doing the Pro Tour thing, that's not a discussion. But I think there are a number of people out there who, if given the option between the world premiere event or going to a calling, if they had to choose between the two, they may have chosen one if they hadn't already signed up for New Jersey. So, there is that part of the discussions, like maybe the reason they waited was to ensure that their numbers were bigger at the Pro Tour. Again, that's very conspiracy tinfoil hat. I don't know it's highly unlikely that was part of it, but it does, whether or not that's true or not, it does speak to overall that had more advance notice been given, people may have made different decisions, right? And whether that's good or bad or what they wanted or it isn't relevant, I think it's true that there are individuals out there who may almost certainly would have made different decisions. So again, it's possible. Now, I feel that all of what I just said on LSS's side makes sense, right? They have to get their plans together before they roll it out. That said, there are plenty of reasons, in my opinion, why that time frame might be a bit tight for players, right? The first claim, which I don't actually think is a realistic limiter, is financial. Things are more expensive with less time. Under most circumstances, flights and hotels booked months in advance are cheaper than weeks in advance. And again, I realize there are sites you can use for all that and stuff, but by and large, scheduling stuff earlier is better than scheduling it stuff later, right? I mean, you can't really, I'm not saying you didn't get some great last minute deal sometime, but by and large, for the masses, it's cheaper to do stuff earlier, right? I mean, you can't argue with that. That said, let's be honest, if we're paying hundreds or more a few times a year to buy cardboard, and then we decide that, or shiny cardboard, right? If we decide that, we want to go do this, we're buying a flight, we're buying lodging, we're paying $130 to $200 for the entry fee to these type of things. By the time you're done, is the extra 5 to 10% or whatever it may be, is that really your primary concern? My guess is it's not, right? I mean, are you going to go if it costs you $10,000? Probably not. But if it's an extra 50, 75, even an extra $100 out of your pocket, is that really going to make or break you making the trip? I think probably for most of us in these games, I mean, let's be honest, if you're doing a luxury travel to go play shiny cardboard, probably that's not the biggest factor in your decision, right? So is it a factor? Absolutely is a factor. Is it the largest factor? Probably not, right? And instead, I think it's often not about money at all, because many of us gaming as adults have families, careers, and other life events to plan around. And I think for a lot of us, that's kind of the issue, right? Because for me personally, we've had our pending Memorial Day weekend vacation planned since November of last year, right? Most people plan their trips and holidays much farther out than 6 to 8 weeks. And I know that whenever I leave town for work, I need to ensure that I have coverage. And the earlier you get that coverage request in and notify your peers and work it out, the easier it is to resolve schedule conflicts, right? Now, again, to be 100% clear, the expectation even of yourself, you attend every event, is not only unachievable, but ludicrous. So that's not what I'm driving at here. But what I am saying is that budgeting and balancing time off work, family commitments, etc. for fab, even just to go play your armories and stuff, is challenging enough that adding in changes that are only 60 days-ish out is a valid concern. So, with all that said, what is the right amount of time, right? For me personally, I feel that 7 weeks notice was not sufficient. That said, if I really soul search, the decision I made to unfortunately not go to Las Vegas, given its proximity to our already scheduled vacation and my son's birthday, the reality is I probably would have made the same decision even if they had let us know a month ahead, even a month before that. And, when it comes down to it, for me, aside from, again, being on my, son's birthday weekend, if I really wanted to make something like that happen, I probably could make it happen. Sure, I'd have to call in favors of all sorts with my wife, my coworkers, but I probably could have made it happen. So from my perspective, I feel that 90 days should be the minimum for something like this. And, obviously the more time, the better. But I'm trying to look at this from all sides, right? From LSS, the organizers, the details, the organization, the announcements, and all that, right? All the concerns we mentioned. And why 90 days? Honestly, because that's a quarter. And that just, for those of us in working, quarter seems about right. I mean, that's I'm just shooting from the hip on what feels right. And realistically, I acknowledge that, the practical difference between 7 weeks and 12 weeks is not huge. I mean, it'd be great to have 6 months notice, but I'm also trying to look at it from their side as well. So, I'm just one dude and I'm in a different phase of my life than many others. So what do you think, right? Not just what would work for you necessarily, but what do you think would functionally work best for the community at large, balanced with the obstacles that LSS and their partners have to face, right? So let me know in the comments below, and let's get the conversation started. So now that we've had that, side of the conversation, let me float one last proposal, and one that I think is functionally realistic, given the LSS has been able to establish and grow their competitive program over the last, year and change at this point, right? So what if they were to publish a schedule of sorts with a long-range calendar of events and locations? Now, they don't have to publish the details and what it's going to be, but at least it lets people know. It's like, hey, in mid-June, there's going to be an event in Las Vegas, right? And maybe it has to be more specific than mid-June. I grant you that. That's fair. But at least it gives people an idea. It's like, hey, there's going to be something in Madrid in January 2022 or whatever it may be, right? So what do you think about that? Is that even realistic? Would it be too difficult for them to manage that successfully? Because look at it on the flip side, the counter argument to that. Let's say they eventually have some sort of logistical issue crop up and they have to cancel one of those events. Well, now that they've canceled one of their pre-scheduled events and everything fell apart from that, nobody trusts the schedule anymore, right? So it's almost kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't type thing. So yeah, anyway, folks, that's just really it for today, right? Just musing over how much time do we really need? Should we need? How much does the community need? How much time does LSS need? I think it's an interesting conversation. So what do you think? What works for you? What doesn't? And on top of that, will you be there for the world premiere weekend?